Welcome back to The Explainer. So, today we are diving into a narrative that is, frankly, one of the absolute most unpredictable, surreal, and just wildly educational sequences of events we have ever covered. Seriously, buckle up. We're talking intense scientific theory, literal dark magic, high-voltage physics, and a kidnapping that completely rattled the halls of an elementary school.
I mean, you really have to ask yourself, how exactly does a 9-year-old TV presenter survive getting sucked into a dark portal, tortured on an electric bed, and subjected to massive informational dumps on volcanic science? It sounds completely impossible, right? Well, to truly grasp the sheer unpredictability of this totally bizarre trial of resilience, we're going to break it down piece by piece.
Okay, let's meet our main protagonist, JJ Warden. Now, he is not your average 9-year-old kid. JJ is actually an established TV presenter on a program called The Cooking Foodie. And what's truly mind-blowing about his broadcasting career is that he literally started at the tender age of 3. Yeah, 3 years old. That massive head start definitely built up the kind of ironclad resilience he is going to desperately need for what's coming.
And we absolutely can't forget his steadfast companion, Mikey. They've been friends since the 3rd grade. And he is equally central to this whole ordeal. If you notice the glasses, he actually just started wearing those on May 17th of the year this event went down. It's just one of those small, normal childhood details that, makes the weaponization of his personal fears later in the story so much more horrifying.
So the day of the incident actually kicked off innocently enough, with, of all things, an incredibly intense deep dive into geology. JJ found himself learning all about the 3 main mechanisms of volcanic eruptions. First up is magmatic, which is basically the decompression of gas within magma that propels it forward. Then you've got phreatic eruptions. These are driven purely by the superheating of steam because of the close proximity of magma, but without any fresh magma actually reaching the surface. And finally, phreatomagmatic, which is driven by this incredibly violent, direct interaction of magma and water. Pretty heavy stuff for a normal school day, right?
Now, this geology lesson also dove into a totally crucial metric for understanding eruptive strength. It's called the Volcanic Explosivity Index, or VEI. It's a logarithmic scale that goes from 0 to 8, and it operates a lot like the Richter scale does for earthquakes. Basically, every interval represents a massive 10-fold increase in magnitude. To put that into perspective, just imagine the crazy difference between a calm Hawaiian eruption, which sits at maybe a 0 or a 1, compared to a colossal, cataclysmic, ultra-Plinian eruption, like think Lake Toba 74,000 years ago, completely maxing out at an 8.
So yeah, it was a morning of really rigorous yet peaceful academic study. They were contrasting calm, effusive lava flows with those violently explosive Plinian eruptions that can literally send ash 45 kilometers straight up into the sky. But, as you might have guessed, this quiet, scholarly atmosphere was about to be totally shattered in the most bizarre way you could possibly imagine. Okay, the bridge between this strict science and absolute psychological terror comes down to one incredibly absurd diagnosis. Mikey was suddenly, and completely falsely by the way, diagnosed with hippopotamonstrosesquipedalophobia, which is, hilariously and terribly, a massive word used to describe the fear of long words. And this whole thing started just because Mikey got a bit spooked when JJ casually dropped the word supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Now, even though they later clarified he really just had a specific fear of that one specific word, this completely bogus diagnosis absolutely sets a devastating stage for what happens next. Enter the main villain of our story, the towering, absolutely terrifying school bully who goes by the name Witherstorm. And the entire conflict ignited over something that seems so trivial, an art critique. Basically, Witherstorm proudly shows off his brand new masterpiece to Mikey and JJ. Now, Mikey tried his best to be polite, commenting on the colors and being nice, but JJ did not hold back at all. He gave this absolutely brutal critique, just flatly calling the artwork trash. And while in this universe, a harsh word about an art project is apparently enough to trigger a cataclysmic, multidimensional event. Witherstorm's reaction was, to put it mildly, explosive. He just screamed at them, "How dare you look at my masterpiece and say that? You think painting is easy? I'll burn the skin off your bones." I mean, those chilling words literally echoed through the whole auditorium hall. And it wasn't just some idle bully threat either. Witherstorm unleashed a dark, wildly volatile portal right there in the middle of the school, violently sucking JJ and a completely terrified, crying Mikey straight into some unknown dimension.
Now, the response from the adults was immediate and highly dramatic. The teachers over at Meissen International School went into an absolute lockdown. They converted a standard faculty meeting into this super intense emergency rescue briefing. The administration declared with almost military-level gravity, "We will not let Witherstorm's dark magic dictate the fate of our students."
They went all out, mobilizing top science and portal specialists to analyze the residual energy, just desperately trying to bring their beloved TV presenters back home. Meanwhile, inside this dark portal, Witherstorm was subjecting JJ and Mikey to a truly surreal brand of torture. Get this, he strapped them into an electric bed specifically designed to deliver agonizing shocks, and while they are actively being electrocuted, he furiously forces them to learn electrical engineering principles. I am not making this up. They had to memorize the strict differences between ohmic conductors, which have constant resistance and perfectly follow Ohm's law, and non-ohmic conductors, like diodes, which have a variable resistance. Witherstorm even went so far as to build a machine designed to destroy all conductors. Oh, and to make matters unspeakably worse, he actually weaponized Mikey's phobia, screaming this insanely long word, aqueo seleno calculinus horatio aluminus ocupra vitriolic, right at him just to trigger his absolute terror.
You know, there's actually this brilliant, really twisted irony happening here. These two boys are enduring the literal, punishing physical currents of electric shocks, while simultaneously possessing the digital electronic currents of their massively successful TV broadcasting careers. The very electricity that literally powered their fame as presenters was now being used as a weapon against them in a dark dimension. And this was right before a lever was pulled that dropped them straight into boiling water in this terrifying cloud of evil breath.
But the chaos couldn't just be contained to the portal, of course. It spilled right over into the real world for a whole weekend of terror. On Sunday, Witherstorm was actually riding in a car when a tire suddenly popped, sending the entire vehicle crashing directly into the Grand Egyptian Museum and sparking an intense fire. Mikey, who was somehow still tethered to this physical world chaos, was left bruised from the ordeal. And then, Witherstorm creates a second painting for someone named Miss Wither. Apparently, it was equally terrible, which caused him to just scream his horrific skin-burning threat all over again. By Monday, it was super clear to their classmates that they had to take action.
So, the student body totally stepped up where the adult portal specialists were struggling. Warden, Mikey's classmate from 4A, who funnily enough actually shares a name with Mikey's family name, teamed up with Armorer from 4B to kick off a daring rescue mission. But right in the middle of this intense mission, Warden uncovered a staggering tragedy. He literally had to call Mikey, who, remember, is currently actively being kidnapped in a dark portal, just to break the devastating news to him that his father had died. The emotional stakes for Mikey were just pushed way past the absolute breaking point here.
But, despite the boiling water, despite the cloud of evil breath, the relentless electrical shocks, and that completely crushing emotional trauma, somehow, both boys survived. JJ's visual evolution from a little 3-year-old just starting his career to this incredibly seasoned presenter is a real testament to an ingrained grit. And it's a grit that is absolutely shared equally by Mikey. That resilience literally saved their lives in that dark rift.
Thankfully, justice did eventually catch up with Witherstorm. The trial was presided over by Judge Cleric, who's actually JJ's own neighbor, and he made it perfectly clear that the ruling was based solely on the facts. Condemning Witherstorm for his incredibly petty, narcissistic grievance over a simple painting critique, the judge handed down a definitive, totally unyielding ruling. He stated, "You are hereby sentenced to serve the remainder of your natural life in a maximum security state penitentiary with absolutely no possibility of parole. The nightmare was legally and permanently ended." Mikey and JJ finally woke up safely in a hospital. JJ was treated for low blood pressure, and they were both given iron medicine to cure some deficiencies. There's this really poignant moment where Mikey smiled remembering taking off his hutra back in 2021. It was this profound realization that they were, finally, truly safe. They were turned right back to the screen, presenting TV happily ever after. I mean, when you look at the sheer scale of what they endured, from cramming the volcanic explosivity index to surviving ohmic torture devices and facing down a dark magical entity, what bounds actually exist for these kids? It's a surreal, completely bizarre, and utterly fascinating journey that proves knowledge and friendship can survive pretty much anything. So what would you have done if you were sucked into that portal? Thanks for hanging out with us on this explainer. We'll see you next time.